Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger, who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this the very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed.
Amen. Well, welcome back to Two Guys and the Bible. My name is C.A. Middleton, and I'm the youth pastor at Lake Athens Baptist Church. And to my left is Bob Vila. No, wait. Sorry that threw me off.
You don't want me to say anything about your flannel. Don't bring up shirts if you don't want to hear about the flannel.
I purposely didn't wear a flannel today
so that you could say
because you were going to make fun of me.
Are you offended?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's just clear example of the oppressor and the oppressed.
I'm oppressed because of my ability to look like Bob Vila.
Anyway, tell them who you are.
I'm Cody Coleman, pastor of Parkview Reformed Baptist Church here in Athens, Texas.
Here we are. It's election day.
That happened before the foundations of the world.
Yes. We're talking about governmental
voting. It's voter. Yeah, election
federal
day.
and state government election.
I read the 10 propositions to the Texas Amendment.
You did?
Some of them are ridiculous.
Yeah, they want to raise, or they want to introduce an income tax here. We don't have income tax here in Texas.
No.
They say they want to do it because it will lower property taxes. But here's what they're going to do.
I never believe them.
So here's what to do. Yeah, they have this little bait, this lure hanging out.
It's always about lowering taxes.
Lower property taxes if you just vote in this income tax. Come on, do it, idiots. Do it. I know you're stupid. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to because, yeah, property taxes in Texas are stupid. Mm-hmm. But that, even if we get an income tax, they're not going to lower our property tax. Come on.
Well, taxes, if you look at and we'll get to it, the scripture here says we do need to pay some sort of tax for a government who does things to protect the good and to punish the wrong, not to save whales, do cancer treatment, all sorts of things that the government doesn't need to be involved.
Hey, man. You just mentioned the two things they're supposed to do. Uphold justice and protect their citizens. Mm-hmm. That's it, guys. That's all the government's supposed to do. That's their only job. And when they go beyond that, like
they have,
like most governments, all governments, in a sense, have, they're no longer holding God as their authority. Mm-hmm. And
they're trusting in their own wisdom and power and ability to govern.
Yeah.
It's leading that way.
Let's look at this a little bit, this passage. Well, this is Romans 13.
In light of voting.
And we'll talk about some of the common.
Right.
So let every person be subject to the governing authorities. That's pretty clear.
That is a clear passage, and often it's the clearest ones are the ones that we want to ask silly questions like that.
Explain away.
Could you just? I don't know if that's what it really means.
Yeah,
but it does mean that we're to be subject to the governing authorities.
Yeah, because for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God.
Mhm. So the reason we're subject is because I look at it like this. Women, wives, submit to your husband as unto the Lord. Marriage is an institution created by God. Government in this context is an institution created by God. We submit to them as unto the Lord. We're submitting to God by submitting to the governing authorities. Can we just make a context point here?
Yeah.
Romans.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's very important.
I mean,
yeah, he's writing to the Roman church.
Yeah.
Who were, I mean, that's the biggest government the world has ever known at this time.
And equally corrupt.
Yes, and equally corrupt.
And hating of Christianity. Yet he tells them to submit to them.
Because there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So have all governments been instituted by God?
Ultimately, yes. I say ultimately yes because obviously there's sinful, corrupt, God-hating governments, but God has predetermined that they would exist
And
to carry out his plan and purpose.
Yeah, he has a purpose for it. What men mean for evil, God means for good.
I mean, Egyptian, Pharaoh, that's a governing authority that exists, and God made him and created that and allowed that to be sustained in order to carry out his purpose. So.
Okay, verse 2, therefore whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment.
Is there ever a time to resist?
Yes.
Okay.
Because look, let's go to the next verse. We're arguing that there is going to be a time to resist. Verse 3, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. That's what they're supposed to do, right? Good conduct, like in China, for example, right now, pastors and Christians are being put in prison. They're having their churches demolished. And I'm talking about godly people, right? One man I know of has been in prison for over 2 years now. Man, have you ever watched that guy, any of his sermons? Phenomenal. He's from Early Rain Presbyterian Church, I think. Great preacher. But, so in their case, the rulers are doing the opposite of what this says. They are promoting bad conduct and punishing good conduct.
So we would say, if subjection and submission and obedience to the governing authorities results in disobedience to God, we do not submit and subject ourselves and obey the governing authorities.
Yes.
You take certain people that were in government positions, and the governing authority said homosexual marriage, so-called homosexual marriage, is legal and you need to grant them all the rights. And someone says, no. Right?
Yeah.
We're seeking to be obedient to God. It's not marriage.
And again, we run into these issues because the government is trying to go beyond their two responsibilities.
Right. That's the thing. The biggest problem we have is that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just leave us alone.
Yeah. If the government is just doing the two things they're supposed to do, there would never be any reason to disobey or to ignore their rules. But when they're trying to be involved in every square inch of the human domain, they're trying to be God themselves, coupled with a bunch of greedy, radically depraved sinners that are in charge of all this and all doing all this, man, it's just a recipe for a complete disaster. And honestly, we see it, right? 65 million dead babies. You know,
there's farmers and ranchers and that are punished for stewarding their land to produce a crop that feeds thousands and thousands of people, millions of people in the country, and are punished over silly environmental laws.
Yeah,
like that aren't even just that aren't
collecting
justified.
rainwater.
Yeah, I mean,
hey, kids can be getting citations for selling lemonade on the sidewalk in some areas.
The state that I grew up in Washington State, protects salmon better than they protect children. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I
was reading about an endangered species of a slug one time. I'm not kidding. And this endangered species of slug, you can get prison time if you go on.
But you can murder a baby.
Clearly, folks, this isn't a God-honoring government that we currently sit under right now.
So how do we, there are areas we can submit to them.
Sure.
And we ought to.
Yeah.
Based on the Word of God.
Yeah.
And we ought to pay our taxes.
Do we have to?
Yes. Even if we think they're unjust. They're full of injustices and they're just downright stealing from us. No one likes taxes,
but I am willing to pay my share because if the government is going to do its two primary jobs, that's uphold justice when justice needs to be given and protect us from harm. There's the tax money to do that. Thank you, government, for taking care of us and upholding justice. Oh, wait, you're also going to be in charge of our health care and our school systems and college tuition and
why is it that
marriage and
why is it that, like, so do you remember when we were growing up and the steroid thing was huge in Major League Baseball, right? It didn't dawn on me till later. Why is there Major League Baseball players and executives and owners standing before the federal government giving an account about what's going on in Major League Baseball? What is the government doing in Major League Baseball? Leave it alone.
It's none of your business.
It's none of your business. And that's really, I think, the point that I think I'm for government shrinkage.
Yes. Well, I mean, you have to be if you want a biblical government.
Right.
You can't want a bigger government.
No.
And so, let's just finish this passage, and we'll talk about some modern things. No, you're yelling again.
Why am I?
All right. Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. This is true. If you do wrong, you should be afraid of the government. But sadly, wrong is sometimes celebrated. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience.
That's an amazing passage.
Yeah.
That I just never have really let it sink in. If you want to avoid the wrath of God, be subject to them. Not because it earns us anything from God, but it is a fruit of the reality that God has changed you and saved you.
Yes. Good point. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For the authorities are ministers of God. are they here?
They're supposed to be. Go ahead.
I was just going to finish the verse, attending to this very thing.
The reason, and I know this is like my soapbox, this is man in their depravity always seeks to be God. And so we have a government that thinks it's smarter than God. We do. Because they don't know God. They don't know that God is all wise, that God is all knowing, that God is good, and all of his law is good. Now, there's some things I don't think we ought to do, according to the New Testament law.
Yeah.
But the principles and the spirit and the morality behind that are in God's law are applicable to today and to this government. But our government and the authorities have abandoned. But here's the problem. It's not that I want our governing authorities to just sit down and read this. That would be good. And apply each one of them exactly to it. That's not what I'm talking about. I want them to be born again, their hearts to be changed, so that they have a humble, submissive heart to God and his authority over their life. Because that's why we have socialism, communism, Marxism, and waves coming into our country. We need to go back and talk to the people that we've pushed out to pasture, the old people in our country, right? When they're about a certain age, you just kick them out to pasture. Because they lived in a time where they were fighting against those very things to try to keep that away. So they understand the dangers. We're talking about it because we see it on the news, and we don't know exactly.
Well, during the Cold War time, if somebody just suspected you to be a communist, the FBI was showing up at your door and hauling you in. Mm-hmm. Now we have 1/3 of millennials saying they believe communism would be a good idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good idea till you're having to fight over a morsel of bread. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't get it,
but
man.
God warned in the Old Testament this would happen. When you abandon him and his rule and authority and lordship and kingship over his creation, you get this. Yeah. This is the result.
So what do you do with all this?
Go bury yourself in no.
Today's election day, right? Are you going to go vote?
Yeah. That's why I needed to read the deals to make sure I know what I was talking about.
So, how do you vote for somebody these days?
So you don't have to say it. The Democratic Party runs on a platform that is completely anti-God and is willing to crush baby skulls outside of the womb. You can't vote for that.
No.
Now, does that mean you run and vote for every Republican? No, you need to be informed. I got the information on the 10 propositions off of a voter's guide that said Christian's voter guide, but it basically it wasn't giving me do this or don't do this. It was just giving me the information, and it was good. iVoter guide would typically be a place you can, because you need to be informed.
Yeah.
You don't just go in and be like, well, or ask your neighbor, hey, well, who'd you vote for?
I always vote this way, so I'm just going to go. It's like, it's hard. It's hard to vote for me these days on many things, because I'm just fed up. Mm-hmm. Our government's way too big. They're totally unjust. You start liking somebody, and none of them are perfect. I'm not looking for a pastor or something, but you start looking, liking one candidate or something, and then,
yeah, no, I get it. And I think the way I've just started to view it is I want to seek to love my neighbor the best I can. And this is a way I can love my neighbor. by seeking to vote for things. Anytime the government wants to add taxes, I don't care what they're telling me. The bait doesn't matter.
No.
They've done a terrible job with all the taxes that they already have.
Yes.
Throwing more money at it does absolutely nothing.
No.
I told my congregation, the reason why we don't give the government all the authority to do all these things is because if you told the government right now, all I want you to do is on this 40-story building or however tall, on every floor, I want you to put one water cooler. They'd screw the whole thing up. I mean, I have them down there at the bottom.
Yeah.
There's elevators, stairs, there's enough people. Just take one of these water coolers and put them on each floor. They'd screw the whole thing up.
Yeah.
They'd have to have a committee, and then there wouldn't be enough of one group on the one committee. So they'd argue about the committee, and then they'd want to impeach Trump.
And kill baby.
That's it. I mean, and I just said put water on each floor.
Yeah.
But that's the ridiculousness of our government. They're utterly out of control.
And I would argue I think both, we live in a two-party system, and I think both parties are compromised.
Yes, absolutely.
Right now. Having said that, I believe a Christian in his conscience can vote for some candidates. Under a Christian in good conscience can vote for any Democrat whatsoever. Because of what you said, they run on the platform of murdering babies. And that's their primary way they get voters to turn out for them. Now, do they really care about abortion as much as they talk about? No, they care about the votes that come from pretending to care about abortion. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to argue that the majority of the pro-life politicians are the same. Because there has been opportunity to completely abolish and outlaw abortion in this country several times. And it's the Republicans that keep shooting it down. Why? Because in 4 years, they're going to need to run on a pro-life campaign for voters to turn up and vote for them. They both want abortion to stay around because both sides need it to turn out voters. And I'm not saying don't go vote. Sure. I'm saying use discernment. Find the people that are truly abolitionists who truly want government to shrink back down closer to where it's supposed to be. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think you said it right. You need to go vote. You need to use discernment. You asked the question, what should we do? I also think that there should be good, godly Christian men, not pastors. I just don't like when pastors are like, I'm going to run for office. No, do not lower yourself to such a thing. Pastoring is the greatest and highest of all things. You don't have time to be running for political office. You have to take care of your flock. So but do what you want. That's just my personal opinion on that. But godly Christian men who will run for offices.
And be consistent.
Yes, and not compromise and be willing to be laughed at, ridiculed, mocked, all of that, because that's going to happen. And stand for truth. Or will they win? Probably not.
Well, that's what's sad is that a lot of times they don't even win their state elections. If you remember the guy from Oklahoma, a couple of years ago, he was running for governor. He was it's going to sound like a one-issue guy here, but it's a huge issue. He ran on an abolitionist platform, like we're going to abolish this stuff in Oklahoma. It's done. What is his name? But he didn't even come close to winning. And I saw him everywhere, TV, internet, social media, talking about abolishing abortion in his state. And he didn't even, I think he got like 4th or 5th place in the governor of Oklahoma race. They I don't know what it is, man. Like, people want the most likable person and not the most God-honoring person.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we can argue that we never go there.
You know, I think that the other thing that you asked what we can do. We vote, people run. I'll tell you what we can't do as a church. And we cannot be more patriotic and American than we are Christian and biblical.
Yeah.
We can't make our Christianity American. It needs to be Christian. It needs to be biblical. And for churches to go berserk. I mean, some churches on 4th of July have the most ridiculous extravaganzas. And I'm not saying you cannot be patriotic.
I know. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't love our country and do right and all those things. But the church, that's not the church's business. Yeah. We can talk about it. Like this. We ought to talk about it.
And be thankful.
And be thankful.
That we live.
And be thankful for people who fought.
Oh, yeah.
So that we could have this freedom.
We're sitting here talking to a camera.
Right, yeah, all of this is, and so we need to be thankful for all of that. But to put it above.
If you replace the worship of God with the worship of nation, you've created a major atrocity. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes, and we're
not talking about
give honor where honor's due. Yeah. We need to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Or to side with someone and then begin even to compromise theological values just because you love a candidate. You can't do that either.
It sounds like you're thinking of a specific instance.
Well, there's several specific instances.
Yeah, I was talking about this yesterday with somebody in my church. And we were both like, you know what, if you like a particular politician, candidate, that's fine. As a pastor, that's what we're talking about. But when you're willing to just set aside what you said, all theological convictions, all biblical authority, and go head first, headlong into it, with no regard for anything, then you need to step back and examine what you're doing. And I'll just give the example. Here recently, Jerry Falwell Jr., Jack Graham, and Robert Jeffries all publicly endorsed Paula White's new book. Paula White is a heretic. She's claims to be a prophet. In the book itself, she claims is an epistle from God to the people. And they all came out, and she's a prosperity teacher. I mean, just all the popular heresies that are running rampant today. And all three of these men came out and supported and publicly endorsed her book. Why? Because I believe, not that they love the book or love her, but because she is on President Trump's spiritual advisory committee and she is his pastor.
Right.
And they don't want to do anything to separate, to put themselves on the outside of that tight little spiritual bubble that's around Trump. That's an example of
you just abandon your
letting politics.
Listen,
control.
I'll go on. I'll say it. Yeah, I'm a pastor, and I voted for Donald Trump. But I'm not going to lose my theological mind.
Yeah,
because of that.
Right.
And if someone gets offended that I did that, well, I'm sorry.
And I would argue, or at least I would say, You didn't skip to the polls that day, eager and excited to vote for Donald Trump. You went to the polls that day hoping that Hillary Clinton would not win, a woman who stands up there in a live debate in front of millions of people and argues that you can kill babies even after they're born. Mm-hmm. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, I was not like cheer. I mean, I just moan and groan, and it's a sobering thing to go, this is the options. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I mean, what are we? But I'll tell you this, if you want to give respect and honor to someone, you don't have to like the guy. But I'll do this. This is one guy who at least, not that I like everything that he's done, he's at least attempted to seek to do everything he said he was going to do.
That's true.
He said he was going to do certain things, and he sought to do certain things. That's far better than 90% of the candidates that go out there and they run around and they tout all this stuff. Oh. And then they spend the next 4 years hawing around and they don't get anything done. And here's the thing. When we talk about getting things done, we're talking about protect the good, protect the citizens, let your citizens flourish as they will. Any time that you in history see the government put a grip in whatever form, the country, the people rebel. I mean, let me do prohibition. Was a great example. But here's what we'll do. We'll outlaw all alcohol. The government does not need to be in the business of outlawing alcohol. Here's the problem. You know what happened? There was more alcohol in the country during Prohibition than when there wasn't Prohibition.
Yeah. Because men are rebels by nature.
Yes. But it also proves this. They're creative and inventive, even in their sin. Yeah. And they produced a way of making this happen regardless. God has made us to flourish like that, and we can't be choked down by a tyrannical government, which is the way that we're going when you give them more and more power. And stop telling them, this is your job. Your only job is this. Yes. Not museums.
That's what we need to get back. Yeah. National parks.
I mean,
who doesn't love Yellowstone? But the government don't need to be in charge of that.
No. Who doesn't love museums? They don't need to be in charge. Who doesn't want cancer treatment things being done and new inventive things and research happening? I do. I don't want the government. They can't put water coolers on every floor. I don't want them in charge of cancer. You know?
You are yelling at me. So, anyway, have a great election day.
Yes.
And go vote your conscience.
And be subject to every governing authority. When
they honor
God, and it is good and right.
And then sometimes we have to humble ourselves and be subject to them anyway.
So,
right now, I think our tax system is way unjust. I still have to pay them.
Sure. Yep.
Anyways, thank you again for watching.
Yep.
Two Guys and the Bible.
And I hope this has been real strengthening to all the saints out there. And the prayers, of course, sinners saved. And mostly God glorified. So.